All right, Lee, let's take a look at the 60-some acres you have in northern Minnesota. I know just to the west of you is phenomenal, phenomenal deer country. Then it starts getting a little sandier over this way, but you're real close to that triangle over there, so I'm sure you have some decent bucks running around. Now, when I look at this piece here, two major considerations that we'd take a peek at if we were putting together a full plan for you. And one of those is going to be contiguous cover, and the other one is going to be neighboring pressure. Now, your contiguous cover, we'll talk about neighboring pressure. Pretty unpredictable over here from the state side. It could vary from year to year, so we're not going to know what happens there. So we're going to assume that these deer are going to come under pressure, and we're going to build off of that. Topographically, we just don't have a lot of topography. I zoomed in here a little bit and took a peek. Looks like you might have one horseshoe-shaped ridge of sorts just to the east of you that can bed deer for any west wind. Any west wind, there should be deer topographically over here. Here's a southern place where they can bed topographically. So count on a few deer being over there as long as that's wooded. Looks like it drops off. I don't know what they got going on over here, if they're going to let that grow up into something that turns into deer bedding. And most of this looks like it's kind of a sandier pine plantation with some wet stuff mixed in. These younger pines here, when we have the pines on these properties, we also have taken into consideration, here's a pretty fresh cut. When the state's going in there and logging off these areas and creating fresh cuts, when those areas are younger and it gets thick with the regeneration on the pines, if they don't replant it when they're, say, 7, 8, 10 feet tall, and there's still a lot of forbs in the ground there, the deer are going to use those areas to feed. So you guys can play around in there when they're the right age. Now, it depends upon how the state maintains these pine plantations. If they're doing some thinnings, and they're doing any kind of spraying to control the hardwood growth inside there, there are times when these big blocks of timber are a deer desert of little to no value for the white-tailed deer. It's not thick enough for them to bed, it's not safe enough for them to bed, and there's no food there for them, and if they travel through them, they feel exposed, so they don't use them that much. So you guys will have to kind of look at what you got both on your property and the neighboring properties for the timber age, and we have maps we can look up on that too in a full plan. But that'll give us a feel for when the timber is at a certain age class, the deer are going to be in there. First couple years, there's some feed in there for them. They'll be in there primarily at night. Once that cover gets over their head, now we might have feed and bedding for a decade. So be cognizant of the logging that goes on in your area and know that we're not only hunting deer that are on us, we are hunting deer that live on our neighbors as well. They're using our deer as part of the property. That's where the contingent cover pops in. So when we're looking at spots that, when I talk contingent cover, I'm talking some kind of cover that can hide the deer as they travel. The edge of this marsh up here, in through here. Best way to think about it is look at these open areas. The deer are going to avoid those as much as they can during daylight. We might find trails across here. A lot of those are typically at night. This open area here, deer are going to avoid that quite a bit. If this is really open down here, the deer are going to avoid that quite a bit during daylight. And we're really only concerned with the daylight movements, so we focus on that. So know that during daylight, when you're trying to hunt those deer, take a look at those lines of contiguous movement and build those into your plan, saying this is where the deer are going to be during daylight. Find a spot for your scent to blow, whether you're hunting the rut or you're hunting bed to feed and feed to bed. We want our scent to blow towards these open areas because the deer aren't in them as much, right? They're going to travel through this heavier cover. They feel safer in that heavier cover. So we want our stand set up in proximity to that heavier cover, our wind blowing towards those dead zones with the food and spots within that cover that the deer feel safe feeding. So we talked about neighboring pressure. I was looking at I looked at all this on OnX over here, all the state land that's available over there. And then I put these access points in here. It looks like you have an access point here. Looks like there might be an access point here for people to use the state land, access point here for people to use the state land. And we can see the road system that runs through this state land. So if guys are using this, if our gun hunters are using it, bow hunters are using it, they're going to use these road systems and branch off of it. Know that we have to plan for the hunters that use this land and approach from down here to push these deer through this property. If you have places for them to set up on your property, where they're never surprised by humans, they never see humans, they never smell them, and they never see them, see, hear, smell them, that's going to be a sanctuary area that those deer are seeking out. So when you're putting in your food plots in this place, again, think access, get into your property as little as possible, think, where is that wind going to blow when I'm hunting that food plots? I want it to blow to these open areas. And I want to be able to get in and out of those food plots multiple times without the deer knowing I'm there with the proper wind. So we need to consider that. As far as bedding goes, we have proven techniques on how to improve these red pine areas to create pockets of bedding cover in the right areas. Do not make a bedding enhancement in an area that's going to make you surprise the deer. If your access is here, and we put a bedding pocket right here where they can see us walking or see us driving, bad idea. Get that bedding away from our access, far enough away from the food plots that we can access those food plots and hunt them successfully. And then in a strategic line so that we have an orderly rut travel when we're going through this property. Obviously up here is going to be a great place to put bedding. Okay, if I put some bedding circles in up here, a couple things happen. I know where the deer are at, which allows me to access my bed to feed and feed to bed routes. I also know where a buck is going to cruise during the rut because there with the north wind, oops, wrong shape there, with the north wind, he is going to come downwind of these bedded does. Okay, with the south wind, he'd be on this side of these bedded does. But you can put these bedding areas in different spots in the property that doesn't affect access and create more of those lines of buck travel. Okay, so be cognizant of that when you put the bedding in. Trying to think of what else. That's kind of the biggest things in this property we're looking at. If you have food in these areas, you're going to have deer. One of the biggest things that, if I'm guessing right, and this is sandier soil, you're going to have to be growing some food where you're not doing constant tillage. If you do constant tillage up here, what happens without that layer of duff to reflect the sunlight in the summertime, this ground just dries out too fast to be able to grow any food plots. So you're going to have to go to a no-till or a throw and grow type of method, which isn't great in these areas. If you can get some perennial plots established with clover or chicory, that'll carry us through a lot of the year, get some cereal grains in the ground in the fall when we don't have to worry about the ground drying up. But when you're doing these plots up here, I'd try to do as little tillage as you can and to focus on planting during the fall planting season or getting the perennials going so we don't have to worry about disturbing this ground to plant annuals. Stick with the perennials and the cereal grains in this neck of the wood. That's all you need up in this area because when you look out, they don't have a lot of ag choices up here. Not that I can see. You've got some hay ground, some different things like that, but you don't have a lot of ag choices. So that's kind of the main things we're looking at. If some of these people down here are growing some row crops that you know of, that's where your deer are going to go at night. All of your deer. So in this neighborhood here, if you can identify some row crop type situations, know your deer are going to go there, plan your bed to feed around that because that's what the deer are going to do. And if you do that, then you're just being a part of the deer's day and trying to influence what the deer are doing. So factor that in. So that's kind of the biggest things we'd look at if we're keen on your property. If you wanted more help, because the topography was what makes deer planning difficult. And your property doesn't have a lot of topography on it. We just don't have a lot of change. We got dry ground and possibly wet ground, but we don't have the roll that whitetails are able to use to set up to see us coming and going. So it makes it easier to plan it. So if you wanted to do a full property plan on here, just tell Sean to run this as a 40. We can take off this swamp ground. I think this is wetter here too. And without the topography, those open areas, it's very easy to lay out a plan like this and call it a 40. And then we can help walk you through this based upon what you know and create a good solid working plan that's going to make this property hunt a lot better. And you're going to need one if you want to run 5 guys out here, because the biggest thing that we have to avoid, number one sin on a property like this, is if we try to have 5 guys and we blanket this entire area with stands and we chase all of our does off this property, our bucks don't have a reason to come here during the rut. So we have to make sure whatever we do, like you talked about, we have to find a way to create an access strategy that preserves those doe groups on our property. That does 2 things. September and October, we're going to see those doe groups on food every night when we hunt them with the right wind. When November comes and everything switches to the rut, when we know where those does are bedded, we can create lines of movements that those bucks will use. If we don't have does bedding on our property, the bucks know that. They don't have a reason to come search our entire property. They'll still pass through here on some of these lines of cover, pass through here, but they're not going to be coming here sniffing for does that they know don't exist. So good luck. If you want any more help, reach out to Sean. Like I said, tell him Brooks said just run the place as a 40, and you can save some money on a full plan. So good luck on this.